The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening, turning the sidewalk outside Marcello's into a mirror of blurred city lights. Emma stood frozen beneath the restaurant's burgundy awning, her second-hand dress clinging to her shoulders, her phone clutched in trembling fingers. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see him, Derek, her ex-fiancé, the man who'd walked out 6 months ago, when her mother's medical bills started piling up. He was laughing, his arm draped around a woman wearing more jewelry than Emma had earned all year. She shouldn't have come. She knew that now. But when Derek had texted her about returning some of your things, she'd foolishly hoped for closure, maybe even an apology. Instead, she'd walked into her own humiliation, carefully staged for maximum impact. "Emma!" Derek's voice carried across the restaurant as he waved her over, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. "Come meet Vanessa." "Vanessa, this is the girl I told you about." The girl, not the woman he'd promised to marry, not the person who'd stayed up countless nights helping him study for his bar exam. Just the girl. Emma's legs felt like lead as she approached their table, aware of every eye in the expensive restaurant following her cheap flats across the marble floor. Vanessa looked her up and down with the kind of pity that burns worse than contempt. "Derek mentioned you worked at that little coffee shop in Brooklyn," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How quaint! Actually, I work 2 jobs now," Emma heard herself say, hating how defensive she sounded. "The coffee shop and weekend shifts at..." "Still trying to pay off Mommy's hospital bills?" Derek interrupted, swirling his wine. "Emma, we talked about this. You can't save everyone. Some people are just meant to struggle." The words hit her like a physical blow. This was the man she'd loved? This stranger wearing expensive cologne and casual cruelty like a second skin? "I have your things in the car," Derek continued, clearly enjoying himself. "But first, why don't you join us for a drink? For old time's sake." His eyes gleamed with malice. "Unless you can't afford it." Emma's throat tightened. She couldn't afford it. Her tips from last week had gone toward her mother's new prescription. Her credit card was maxed out. She'd come here on a subway prayer, hoping to grab her grandmother's necklace, the one Derek had borrowed for his sister, and leave. That's when she saw him. He sat alone at a corner table. A man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, his attention focused on a leather-bound notebook. Something about the set of his shoulders, the quiet confidence in his posture, made him seem like he existed in a different reality than everyone else in the room. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and their eyes met. For a moment, the restaurant noise faded. Emma saw something flicker across his face. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of some shared understanding of what it meant to be utterly alone in a crowded room. "Emma, hello?" Derek snapped his fingers in her face. "God, you're still spacing out like you used to. No wonder you can't keep your life together." Vanessa giggled, a sound like breaking glass. Something inside Emma snapped. Not into anger, but into a wild, desperate courage born from hitting rock bottom. She turned to the stranger in the corner, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe, and walked straight toward him. "Please," she whispered as she reached his table, her voice cracking. "I know this is crazy, and I'm sorry, but could you act like you love me? Just for 5 minutes, please." The man, she could see now he was younger than she'd thought. Maybe early 30s? With dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her, tilted his head slightly. Up close, everything about him screamed wealth. The watch that probably cost more than her annual rent. The subtle sheen of his shirt that only came from fabric she'd never touch. The kind of calm that came from never having to worry about anything as mundane as money. "I'm sorry," Emma rushed on, tears now streaming freely down her face. "My ex is over there and he's being cruel, and I just need him to think that I'm not completely..." She couldn't finish. The absurdity of what she was asking hit her all at once. The stranger studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he stood, and Emma realized he was tall, commanding, the kind of presence that made people instinctively step aside. He reached for her hand with a gentleness that contradicted his powerful frame. "You don't need to apologize," he said, his voice low and warm. "And you certainly don't need anyone to act." He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, and Emma's breath caught. "But if it helps, I'll gladly be whoever you need me to be." Before she could process what was happening, he guided her hand into his arm and walked with her back toward Derek's table. Every head in the restaurant turned. The man carried authority like a force field, and even Derek sat up straighter, his smugness faltering. "Everything all right, darling?" the stranger asked Emma, loud enough for Derek to hear. Derek's face had gone pale. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm Alexander Chen." He said it simply, without fanfare, but the name clearly meant something because Derek's girlfriend gasped audibly, and several nearby diners whispered. "The Alexander Chen?" Vanessa breathed. "From Chen Industries?" Alexander ignored them, his attention solely on Emma. "You ready to go? Our reservation at 11 Madison. Park is in 20 minutes. He turned to Derek with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I assume you have whatever belongs to my girlfriend? If not, my lawyers can arrange retrieval." No, it's in my car. I'll grab it right now," Derek stammered, practically tripping over himself as he rushed toward the exit. The moment Derek disappeared, Emma's legs gave out. Alexander caught her, guiding her gently into a chair. "Breathe," he said softly. "You're okay?" "I'm so sorry," Emma gasped. "I shouldn't have dragged you into my mess." "I'm not your girlfriend. I'm nobody. I'm just—" "You're someone who needed help," Alexander interrupted. "And asking for help is one of the bravest things a person can do." Derek returned with a small box, practically throwing it at the table before retreating with Vanessa, both of them whispering frantically as they paid their bill and fled. Emma opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was her grandmother's necklace, the only thing she had left of the woman who'd raised her. She clutched it to her chest and the tears came harder. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." Alexander sat across from her, signaling the waiter for water. "You don't need to repay me, but I do have a question." He leaned forward, and there was something genuine in his eyes that made Emma's heart skip. "That reservation at 11 Madison Park? It's real. Would you like to have dinner with me? Not as my pretend girlfriend. Just as Emma, whoever that is." She blinked. "Why would you want to have dinner with me?" "Because in a room full of people performing their wealth and status, you did something real," he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "You were vulnerable, honest, and you didn't ask for money or connections or anything except basic human kindness. Do you know how rare that is?" Emma laughed through her tears. "I asked you to lie. You asked me to help you survive a moment of cruelty with your dignity intact," he corrected. "There's a difference." He paused. "My mother was sick for 3 years before she passed. Medical bills, experimental treatments, everything. I watched my father work 3 jobs and lose himself in the process. I built my company on the promise that I'd never forget what that felt. Like being desperate, being dismissed, being treated as less than human because your bank account is empty." Emma stared at him. This millionaire CEO who somehow understood exactly what her life had been. "So dinner?" Alexander asked again. "No pretense, no acting. Just 2 people sharing a meal and maybe a story or 2. Emma looked down at her grandmother's necklace, then back up at this unexpected man with kind eyes and an open face. For the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." As they left Marcello's together, Emma caught her reflection in the rain-soaked window. She was still wearing her cheap dress, still carrying all the same worries she'd walked in with. But somehow she stood taller, because someone had seen her, truly. Seen her, not as a girl to be pitied or dismissed, but as a person worthy of kindness. And sometimes that was enough to change everything.